Okay, this month I found Dave through the Quickie list on Facebook, and I asked him if we had met before. We have not, and I wanted to let him. I thought he's been to Burning Man and done some things, and I thought he'd be an interesting person to go ahead and get in on this. So with that, I'd like to have Dave take it away. We got your audio on?
Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me?
Hey, we got you.
Okay. All right. Well, my name's David Smith. I live in Marin County, California. Born in California in San Fernando, so I've been here all my life. The airplane itself was an idea of me to do a project with my dad. And my dad had been involved in airplanes, but it was all before I was born. He was 44 when I was born. And he had biplanes and Cubs and things like that, but I didn't get to see any of it. So I started out hang gliding. And let's see here. I switch it. You can see some of the old hang glider wings hanging up in the hangar here. Haven't been out in decades. But yeah, I was back in the 79, 80, started out hang gliding. But when the first Quickie came out, my dad got a picture of it and showed it to me, and it was like, that is really cool. But the single place didn't interest me that much, but the design did. And well, when it was got Popular Mechanics did a spread on the Q-2, I had the picture of it on the cover and everything like that. When I saw that, that's it. I didn't care what it was made out of or anything. It's just like, we're going to do an airplane. Let's do that one. Because my thought at the time was, hang gliding is, to me, is still the best form of just pure flight, ever. So I think if I was going to have an engine, ultralights were just coming out at the time, and it didn't interest me all that much. If we're going to have an engine, at least make it so it's something that can go someplace. And then the Q2 design came along. It was like, okay, that's it. So we bought the kit, the 2178 in 1981, and we spent the next 3.5 years, part-time working on it together. And like I say, my dad was quite a bit older, but as we were getting finished with the airplane, we had another child. We had one already, and so essentially the airplane and our son were born really close at the same time. So I've kept the airplane pretty much flying the whole time. I don't like things that aren't running. There's no real accident history with it other than breaking propellers, which I have the wall of shame on that one. I can run and get one for you.
You're not the only one, Dave.
Oh, I know. Well, it's easy enough with these things. And yeah, the first time was a ground loop, because I have a valve in the thing. I'll get into it later, but I did two things wrong. I had disabled my differential brakes, and I had my parking brake on just a little bit to keep the wheels from spinning while I was flying. And I had landed with that a couple of times before, not a big deal with the brake on, but not without the differential braking. And between the two, it pulled me into a ground loop, which it basically just did 180, kind of spun around. But at the very end, a little ridge on the edge of the runway, kicked the tail up, and I just slowly tipped over onto my nose and broke the propeller. And then the unfortunately nobody saw it, and I was able to push it off the runway and hide it, and never had to report it. But the second time, the runway here over time, because it's on fill, gets wavy, which turns out that's just the worst thing for, you know, the Q style airplane and Learjets. And so it was taking one of my son's friends, this girl, on her birthday flight on a gusty day on the wavy runway, and just a combination of wind gusts and hitting the waves just right. The plane got kicked up in the air. The tail got kicked up into the plane got kicked up into level flight, and then the gust stopped, and it dropped and took a half inch off at the end of the propeller plus, and then was trying to fly. So I had to make the decision of go around or put it back on the runway and try to get stopped again, which I had never ever done on any plane in any situation. I decided to put it back on the ground. So with the differential brakes, being able to do some quick S turns, I got the plane stopped, and it was a good thing that I did, because come on, move around. There we go. Here's what the propeller looked like, and it was trying to fly with this kind of stuff missing. And I've ended up off the runway a couple of times. Was landing at an airport out in the valley, very small airport, maybe 25 or 30 feet wide, kind of a maximum effort. And just as I get it on the ground, a two-place ultralight pulls right out in front of me, sees me, and tries to turn around, like somebody trying to back up to the gate on a train track. And so I'm going to hit him doing 50 miles an hour. I'm just about ready to put the plane on its nose. I've got the brakes jammed up, the tail's coming up, and I thought, plan B. I'm looking right in the guy's eyes. And so I just let off on one of the brakes, and the plane did this instantaneous 90-degree turn. And I thought, well, this is a ground loop. I'm not going to be able to survive, but what the hell? And I stomped on the other brake, and it did another 90-degree turn in the dirt, and then came to a stop right next to that guy. And turned out it didn't hurt me or the plane or him or anything like that, And then the second time was same airport, different time, but taking off and hitting a puddle, which I saw Sam had that same kind of experience. And what was weird was it hit the puddle, and so I stomped on the rudder, and because it had been raining, my feet were wet and my foot slipped off the pedal. And and now I'm bushwhacking full power through the weeds, and I'm starting to bring off the power, but I get my feet back on, and I went, oh hell, and I just gave it full power and just took off through the weeds. And didn't go back to that airport until probably 20 years later. I took my wife out there, and after we landed, there's a little restaurant there. It was the reason for going in the first place. I sat and told her about my adventures there, which I had never had.
Let's see the airplane here.
Okay, you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, so this is built pretty much to plans. Like I say, it started early on. I never even had seen anyone before we started this thing. Never flew one before I flew it, and because it was all still pretty new. So this is my the most recent propeller. I've tried several others, and this one I've had to have repitched twice to get it to kind of get closer to what I was wanting. I was wanting a little more RPM, and when I got it, it was the other way for some reason. So you can see I've got intakes close to the spinner here, which work good as long as the as this part of the propeller is it's got a good shape to it. But anything that's flat right here just stops the air. I tried a fiberglass propeller that had flat sections right there, and cooling went to hell. But one thing I can do is I can reach in and I can check the oil. I can pull the dipstick out from here, which is nice. One of the other things is the cowl flap. As you can see, it's actually overlaps. It drops down a little bit and overlaps. So the actual air exhaust goes parallel. And then when it opens up, I've got this loose. When it opens up about to here, it gets to be a nice big hole. I've never had any cooling problems. Fairing, you can see I actually took it up into the cowling here. It's a little off, got it loose.
That's very nice. That's an area that I kind of meant to go after on mine, because it's just a dead, for plans, it's just a flat area. And now you faired it in nicely.
Yeah, I really got into fairing on this thing. So coming down around, you can see, this is a wheel pant built almost to the plans, except the side foam pieces that they had you use were 1/4 inch, and then I realized there would be no way you could get a nice smooth, radius along the bottom. So I just switched it out to 3/8, and then also radiused on the inside, because the same thing, if it was just a square cutout that they had you do, you end up running into the edge of the actual hole to fair it in nicely. So I just put foam radiuses in there, and then I was able to shape it the way I want it. Still got bugs on the plane from my last flight. I did the axle pin, I put a mushroom on it, so I don't have a nut here. And then the little plug there is for tire pressure. And you see the fairing I've got going here. And these here, that's just stuck on with some silicone. And I just get in there and just peel it off when I want to get out the brakes instead of going, with the fasteners and all that.
No screws.
Work forever. No screws, yeah. The brakes on this thing. Now I built it to plans, and they worked. When we first got the plane, it was the mechanical drum brakes that came with it, and then they came out with the hydraulic retrofit, but it was just a single lever, and I didn't like that idea right from the very beginning, because I knew what small wheels. I mean, I rode a skateboard. I knew what small wheels can do, and these things being that far apart, I didn't want to give up the control of differential brakes. So I went to the hydraulic, but I modified the original pedals to take the hydraulic rams and made it differential, which I'm glad I did from the very beginning. Now, what they did do was squeak. Remember the original thing had the calipers floating and the rotor hard on the wheel, and I could just not get them to stop squeaking. The little Earhart brakes, have a retract mechanism to pull back the puck, and it just kind of loosens everything up and it would squeak. I tried all kinds of things, even getting rid of the pullback mechanism, which turned out it actually helped, but having the pucks just even rub lightly on the rotors lengthened my takeoff roll. I could feel the plane go, lunge forward once I took off. It was weird. So what I ended up doing was hard bolting the calipers and floated the rotor, and that worked fine. And it's the same little stupid bracket that people seem to complain about, but ever since then it's been fine. So I flew it. This is a GU canard. As you can see, no VGs. I've been flying it like this the whole time. But one thing I ended up doing once I saw the LS canard come out, and it had the sparrow straighters on it, I thought, I don't know if anybody's flown one of these things as they originally were, but they're pitch unstable. It's kind of neutral at 150 miles an hour, but if you go faster, the nose wants to tuck, or if you go slower, the nose wants to pull up. I flew it for years that way, which made it hard for, cross country type of stuff. So I ended up taking those plans for the new canard and modified a single sparrow strainer and put it on here. And that changed the airplane completely. Now it's pitch positive. I can fly with my hand off the stick and just keep the plane level with my feet.
That's interesting. I don't know of any other people that have put a sparrow strainer on the GU canard.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think I'm the only one. So it was kind of an experiment. I did this is just my carded sheet and then a piece of balsa wood. I stuck it on there. It worked. So I painted it. There's no fiberglass on that at all. It's been there for decades now. Other thing, this is the air intake here. That's an actual NACA vent right off of their specs. Exactly what it's going to be. But what I ended up doing was I left this part uncut, and I've been using that as the hinge. So the whole thing opens and closes. I can screw and open and close it from the inside. So when it closes, it goes completely flush. And the fuel tank thing, I magnet on it to hold it. So going on around, you can see the exhaust. I ramped that. That's the cabin air exhaust. I did the tail cone so it can come off. The wingtips were a kind of a favorite of mine. I added they say that you could add 3 inches on the end 4 tips. So this was my idea of what I thought looked fast, which it does look fast. And maybe it is, who knows? But it's strong, it's tough, and it's kind of like one of my little favorite shapes on the plane.
What kind of speeds do you get out?
Pretty much what they say. I cruise at 150. Well, this new prop, I'm doing about 155 now at 3,000 RPM. Flat out 180. That's been consistent. So
have you done anything to the engine over the years?
Yeah, I'll definitely get to that.
Okay. I'll hold back.
So here's the the fillet for in here. Well, one thing I noticed when a lot of people, when you get the things out of line, it would be open in there, and I didn't like that. So at both ends, you could see it's enclosed. But to get this, be able to get the elevator off, there's a section under here that comes out and opens it all up. But you could see it's all faired in. There's no gaps, even when you're gaps or holes. And I did the same thing on the ailerons here. See, there's no hole there, and there's no hole here either. And how I ended up doing this was this part here is actually attached to the tail cone. So when you take the tail cone off, it opens this up to be able to take the aileron off. All right. And see the pitot tube, the vents, I faired those in too. Now the tail. This is pretty much stock. So I've got a filler piece in here, same thing. It's got a little glued on piece of wood that guides it, but it's just stuck in with some silicone so I can pull
Nice.
pull it off.
Nice.
Yeah, so it fairs that whole thing in. But what I did with the tail wheel is I wrapped the spring with carbon fiber at 45. So the spring it's a larger diameter and actually went over the weldment. And then I was able to break it loose. And then I put a taper pin through that, to keep it from, because that's the weak, in a lot of ways, it's the weak point is the twisting here.
Yep.
But the big thing that I did it before we even, got the plane out of the garage, is I noticed that the original hinge was perpendicular to the line of the bracket, but since this thing's coming down at an angle, that made it want to just flip from one side to the other, like clunk or clunk, and I realized that was just, going to be, make the whole thing steering unstable. So what I ended up doing is I cut out the hinge and I angled it. It's the same weldment, but I just changed the angle. So the actual pivot is vertical when the thing is sitting on the ground.
Okay.
And that has worked great. It's
Interesting.
Last year I finally replaced the rear wheel here because it was getting pretty worn down. But other than that, this whole mechanism is the way they had it. But since I've got the differential brakes, I really haven't worried about breaking the thing off because it doesn't matter how fast you're going with these things, you can plant the canard on the ground, and then the differential brakes is by far the strongest control on the plane. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why they went to that single lever, is because of how touchy the differential brakes can be, especially if you put good brakes on the thing. The little Earhart brakes are not very strong, but strong enough to put it on its nose if you stand on it.
Yep.
So they don't need to be any stronger. So coming around here, I got my
Very, very good.
So Canopy is pretty much, as plans built. What I did do is I put a stainless steel hinge because the little aluminum hinge just had too much play in it and weak. So I changed it to the stainless steel, and that's worked good. And I bought a gas spring to hold the thing up, and we're just getting close to the end. And I realized it was just way too strong for the hatch.
Right.
So what I ended up doing is I went and got, this is some wall shelving channel. It had little flares that came off of it. I ran it through the table saw and took them off. And I built this little pivot here. It just pivots on a bolt with some tubing and a little angle piece with a roll pin in it. So it just goes like this and it folds up. And
Nice and simple. Yep.
And that's worked great. This is kind of I sort of looked at this thing at the time. It's more like a Piper Cub, 64 horsepower and simple. So I kept it pretty simple. You can see no radios. I just used a handheld. Look out the window to navigate. No GPS or anything like that.
Oh boy.
Yep. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but I don't have lights on the plane. I love flying at night, and I just didn't think that this was a great idea for this kind of plane and the speeds that it goes to be spending a lot of time flying at night, which I know I would do.
Dave, we have 5.5 minutes left on this section. Just keep on going, and then when we cut it off here, when we come back, I'll just let you I'll keep everybody muted, and we'll just have everybody on. And then when you're done with the basic tour, then I'll open it up for questions and things.
So you can see in here, here's the pedals. I put some wood on the things. Those are the original pedals, but then with the added thing. But if you could see, they're mounted on a plate. The plate kind of hooks and bolts in with a couple of bolts, and it went over to the other side. And at one point, I had a whole nother set of wheels. I mean, a set of pedals, not with brakes. But then, you know, I've got long legs, and nobody else would ever do it. But that plate can be put in two different positions because my dad was short. And if you can see here, I can change where the cables can bolt on, you know, to the actual things itself. So it's a two position or multiple position for pedals when I want it. And I've got two, you know, the original had a universal joint between the elevators there.
Yeah.
And it's still there, but it had play in it. So I added another arm, you know, because the only one arm on one side. So I added another arm. But then because of so I've got the two coming up, but instead of putting it on either side, which twists it a lot more back and forth, I had one arm just come right up to and bolt through the attachment to the other. So they don't move. You can see they don't move very much back and forth, which changes, you know, the differential. And that has worked really good. And the fuel system, trim system, and all that has been the same. In 36 years, I've cleaned that once, changed the filter that's farther on down there once. Here's the single. I kept the single lever idea. So that's all, you know, part of the dual thing now. You can see, thanks, but I've kept the single lever. So it's on this side, the passenger side. And that's what I use for parking brake. I take this little wedge piece and can stick it in there.
Could you back up a little bit on your on that dual brake system, how you have it set up?
Okay, so this is the reservoir. It's just a single Earhart reservoir. And it what is different is I put this valve in. It says, and what that does is that disables the differential. And I did it because I didn't know any better. I didn't know what it was going to be. And so the brakes still work, but if you try to do a differential, nothing happens. And so that valve is in the off position. And this is when I ended up doing that ground loop, is I had this valve in the on position because it's really good for bleeding it. You know, to be able to pump it and bleed it out, having to be able to run things in circles. And so that's what I've ended up using that for, as a bleeding valve. And I'd been working on the brakes, and I left it in the, you know, differential off position, which means that the valve is on. And so you can see the.
And how do you activate it from the pilot side? What type? Oh, those pedals. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Would you happen to remember the brand name of those from 30 years ago?
Well, that's something I got from Aircraft Spruce.
Okay.
Yeah, just some simple You can see that made the little pivots, you know, so they go parallel, you know, as they go back and forth. Like I say, those are the original. This one here, you can see the rudder pedal. I strengthened it up. That's, I think, one of those panic things I bent standing on the thing. It was just.
And take it away.
All right. The last things here is behind the seat. It's where I ended up putting the battery. Made a little box right there, and the little boards are just, you know, stick on with Velcro, and that's worked pretty good. The other big thing that I changed was instead of a T-tail, I did the Aileron reflexor. That was right here, and you know, between that and the sparrow strainer, the plane, it's just a whole different plane. Yeah. The main thing that you use the your elevator trim, you know, on your loading. When I'm by myself for takeoff.
Hang on, Dave. I accidentally muted you. Hold on a second. Oh, come on. Hey, Dave, can you unmute?
There we go.
There we go. All right. Sorry.
So you can see it goes from a little bit up to a little bit down. That's it. And it's a very powerful control. So you can, you know, I have, you know, flown it with it like all the way down and go to take off, and it's like the plane's flying really funny. It's not trimming anywhere on it. Oh shit, you know, if I do it wrong. But that's it. And nice, powerful control. It does everything that I think that it should be done. You know, I never went with a belly board or anything. It's a plane, you know, with the cowl flap open. You know, that's putting some pretty good drag. You can see the cowl flap here. You know what I did to kind of, you know, change it up. But that has worked really good. I have never had any oil or cylinder head temperature problems. Now, the engine here. The first real problem I had with the thing was that, you know, the valves were no good, and I had to check. I had to adjust the valves every 2-3 hours, and I eventually ran out of adjustment on one of them. So I went with, you know, did a valve job. They put in, you know, good valves, and then that fixed that a lot. But the biggest problem is after, you know, 200-300 hours, I'd end up burning a valve, because the right from the get-go, the compression would always kind of go uneven. And so I was thinking that it was the you know, lead deposits, which when you take it apart, you would see in there, was doing it. So I put on rotating valve spring caps on the exhaust, which, you know, makes it much easier for the valves to spin. And, you know, Volkswagen had them for their generator engines, not for cars, but I was able to find them, and that helped. But since then, since this last valve job, which I put new heads on with the big valves, and since this last one, I've been keeping them a lot more even by aggressively leaning the thing, because it, you know, it's actually never gets too hot. From an article that I read about leaning on in a flying magazine, you know, you need to get the actual hot for the stuff that's in the fuel to scavenge the lead deposits, and it's got to be hot. So it has been working much better by just running at maximum lean instead of a little bit rich. The other thing I did was it was running at too high compression, and it was eating up the spark plugs. And so I originally put spacers under the cylinders, and it lowered the compression and made the whole engine just run better and not any less power. But then later on, these cylinders here are aftermarket racing cylinders that start out at 92. And I had the pistons dished so that there's no spacer in there anymore to lower it down. And that has worked pretty good because these things stay round. Now, as far as baffling, you can see I've wrapped the cylinders here, and they wrap underneath a little bit. I've opened up all the little porting and stuff there's all kinds of flashing and things that have in the castings. I've opened all that stuff up.
Good.
From the very beginning. And I don't know if you can see right through there, right?
Yep. Same with metal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the clip that you want all the air to go through there. So you can see this is all the cowling has all been real tight. Opening down here for the oil cooler. But I have always, except for one time, have flown with wrapped pipes. And I've gone through, several of the steel exhaust pipes. But what was funny is it never rusted underneath the wrapping. Where it rusted was right here. And so I flew it once, and I could see heat was affecting stuff down in here. And so I've always been wrapped. It only has that one weld that's in the collector there. And but it's a pretty much stock RevFlow carburetor system. This is the oil cooler is a lifetime warranty, and I did get a leak in the original, and they replaced it. Now, I made a big effort to have the spinner line up with the cowling early on. So this right here, because it's it runs right straight along there, it pretty much has to be perfect, or it's just not. And over time, it sagged. And what it was is there's the bolts. I mean the engine mounts are just on a 1/4 inch piece of plywood with no, according to the plans, there's nothing on the inside to stiffen it. And what I ended up doing, instead of going on the inside, is I made this mounting bracket that incorporated the original mounts, and they go down, and the other mount is down inside there, but then it goes down and it fastens where it's strong. So it's a little bridge on both of it goes across. It really should have just some fiberglass on the webbed on the inside. But that's how I stopped the sagging, and it's been great ever since. I took right here. This is how I'm able to get this out here under the cowling, because I took the little ring off the top, so I can check the oil without having to take the cowling off. It's all automotive spark plugs now. Still got Bendix mag down there, though. This is something that I put in. It's a blast tube for the mag. So far that's been pretty good. I've gone through a couple of voltage regulators. First time, I used to have it mounted right here. Well, this is a real hot spot. So I've moved it and put it here, and I've never had any problem with it. So the biggest thing I had go wrong with this is the original case cracked. It was running at the higher compression. I'd flown out to Oshkosh and back. Turned out it was cracked the whole time.
Oh,
and at the very end, coming across the Sierras back here, I started hearing a noise. And when I got on the ground, it was leaking oil. And there's this part of the casting, it's a little indentation right in here. It was leaking out of there. And when I took it apart, the Revmaster, gave me a new case, or I bought it, I can't remember, but they said it was a different alloy, less prone to cracking. But when I took the thing apart, if you notice, this is all kind of relatively smooth, but there's some sharp angles on the outside. On the inside of these things, it's really rounded and smooth. There's a lot of things going around, but they machine for that big crankshaft, and they left all the sharp edges. And when I got the new case, it was the same thing, and I could tell that the cracks started from those sharp edges. So before I put it together, I got a Dremel tool and rounded off every inside and outside corner, and I've had no, and then running it with a little lower compression, I haven't had any problem since. Because this was like 92, I guess, is when the thing cracked. All right, that's pretty much it for the plane. If any other, we could do some questions and answers here if you want.
All right, I'm gonna unmute everybody, or you can unmute yourselves now. I'll let you do that. And one thing I think we talked about earlier, and I'm sure everybody's gonna be interested, is you've flown this into Burning Man. Could you talk a little bit about what that was like and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say it was one of the best experiences ever. Being an older man and being able to take, young, beautiful girls flying, who wearing practically nothing.
No harm in that.
Yeah.
What the hell is that?
But in that situation, it was like, you were giving people literally the best experiences of their life. They would tell you that, so that's pretty cool.
So what was the airport like there?
Okay, well, it's all airport, the LM land, you can land anywhere you want until Burning Man comes along, and then they actually make an airport out there. And the runway gets they work on it, but it gets kind of roughed up with all the planes going in and out, but it's underneath a soft dust. So when I landed there, which, some people think that it's kind of like, hard to gauge, your height above the playa and things like that and stuff. I didn't find that a problem at all. But it was great. It was landing on it with the soft dust. With the tail dragger, it was real easy. It just had all this give. The plane, wanted to go straight more than anything. And but underneath was the rough, so it rattled the plane a lot. So it was this combination of this cushy feel of the dust and the rattle of just the roughness underneath it. So I ended up rattling the plane more than I'd ever had before during that time I was out there. But the thing to watch out for was that particular year, the playa changes, is that it's that, where it's not been hammered on, it's actually quite smooth on the most part. Taxiing around is what I had to watch out for, because there were these little soft spots, just little patches, and I wasn't paying attention, because they were like little dark spots. And I put one of the wheels in one of those things, and it just stopped dead. And of course, it started to skid around it, which is not a big deal, except if the playa being soft enough, you could dig the tailwheel in and twist it off, is what I was worried about. So when tacking around, I just made sure I kept the wheels out of any of those little holes, and it was just fine. The playa dust is finer than talcum powder. You can suck it right through the engine. The turboprops and the helicopters all just suck that stuff right through. It will clog filters in a big hurry, but you can suck it right through the engine. The canopy here, you get dust all over it. I would spray it with some water, wipe it, kind of mud it up, it would dry, and then just polish off. And, it just kept the canopy polished.
How many aircraft were out there?
Oh God, lots, probably, at least 100.
Oh boy.
And yeah, I mean, now we run 2 runways, because they have, the Platus and everything. I was out there in this big big helicopter comes in, comes straight down, and lands in this gigantic cloud of dust, right? It just completely disappears in this huge cloud of dust. And then I hear it power down, and the dust blows away. And Mark Zuckerberg comes walking out of it. Yeah, I say hi to him and his girlfriend. And then I stopped the pilot and asked him, can you see anything when you're landing here? And he goes, nope. You just set up a descent and just let it go through the cloud until it lands. There's something I did on the cowling. I just, made some ramps for the air to kind of like come up a little easier.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not the plenum like you've got in yours, but it, like I said, I haven't had any cooling problems. The only time where I had a cooling problem was that I tried this isoprop and it was flat right here, and I had to fly it with the cowl flap wide open. I was still able to fly okay, but it just stopped.
Anybody got any questions for Dave?
How many hours
Yes.
have you flown it?
Yes, everyone's got a question.
Okay, it's got about 1,000, maybe 1,100 hours on it. I haven't, since I'm never planning on selling it, I'm just going to donate it to a museum when I'm done with it. I haven't been keeping my hours up quite so much in the last few years.
And
But
a
yeah.
question about your crack on your engine block was how many hours do you have on that when it happened?
I probably had about 350, I think, with 300 hours, I think.
So that's a feature, not a bug.
So that was the original magnesium casing, correct?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
you
so-
replaced it with the aluminum, which is about 7 pounds heavier. Did you notice that part?
No, I didn't.
I
No,
think his alloy one's about 7 pounds beefier or heavier.
I didn't. I haven't noticed it. One of the things when we did the original weight and balance is that it was slightly nose heavy, and we added 5 pounds of weight in the tail, and the tail fin. And it was interesting. I was doing some initial taxi tests before we did that, and the throttle from a dead stop would pull the tail wheel off the ground and lose tail wheel steering. But the one just putting a few pounds in the back there stopped that completely. But yeah, the case has not been a problem since. And rebuilding the engine was not hard. I got to say, the only time it's ever stopped on me in the air was during the initial flying off around the airport. How many hours was it? 50 hours. You had to fly it around on your own. I was doing stalls, and the engine was kind of hot. It was new, and I was flying really slow, and I throttled it all the way back real quick, and it just wound down and stopped. And of course, these things won't windmill. So there was an oh shit with some conviction, but just what Rudder was an option on these things, which I definitely wanted at the very beginning with just this idea in mind. So gave it a little throttle and hit the starter button, and away it went. But that's the only other time that I turned it off in the air was I flew it up to over 18,000 feet and no oxygen, and it was still climbing a little bit. It was like 18,200. It's still climbing, but I'm seeing jets fly underneath me, and so I finally said, okay. But I may have been a little bit hypoxic, but I thought, I wonder what it'd be like just to do a glide. So I turned the engine off and just did a glide for 10,000 feet. I was just over the airport, but yeah, that was the only other time it's been off in the air.
Oh, hey, David, this is Mike Dwyer. I noticed you had, it looked like you have soundproofing under your, behind your engine. How's that work out?
Not much.
Okay.
That I would say this is the biggest complaint I could have with the airplane. It's just how loud it is inside.
Mhm.
So yeah, I put stuff, it's kind of a mesh. I mean, a jute or whatever. I mean, try to wrap
Blue foam.
up in there a little bit. And then that's just a foam thing.
Yes, but you said you didn't really, you can't really say it made that much difference, so.
It made some, but
Okay.
yeah,
And I would also be a little concerned about that green foam if it burns, if it puts off poisonous fumes.
you're probably right.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I don't like that stuff much.
Yeah, you are right on.
What was the purpose of the tinfoil? It appears to be tinfoil, whatever it is, the shiny stuff under there.
Well, the actual noise stuff has got a foil on it.
Oh,
Now this right here is vent, works really good, and I actually have grooves in the panel here. But this is a little air ramp that I made in there, and that directs the air out across my legs a whole lot better. But when you open those things up all the way to the specs of the NACA vent, that last, millimeter, it just opens up, and it's amazing how well it works. So the air blows through here great. But then I can ramp it down, pretty easily, with just this little knob and a screw, and it just, I can just turn the knob and it closes.
Yeah, hey, David, where's your control for the cowl flap?
Cowl flap is right here.
Okay.
It's key handle that I can twist and lock it, and I use that a lot. The what that affects is oil temperature. Has almost nothing on the cylinder head temperature. So that's the one of the things I'm using the most as far as engine control is that, just to depending on what I'm flying, the temperature of the day, and the whole bit. But I normally can keep the oil temperature at around 180 degrees. And even on hot days, with climbing out, with the cowl flap open, it'll get up to 200, but that's about it.
Dave, Chris here. When you were building it, did you have the opportunity to change the angle of incidence in your canard, or are you still running with the original incidence?
This is the original.
Okay.
And also the axles. That's never been changed. So they're all wrong. I mean, it's just like I should have thought about it when you're doing it. Thinking of it. The axles. You had them point at it in the plans. You had them point at each other.
Yeah.
Great when you're flying, they're going to be nice and lined up, but that's obviously not what happens when it's on the ground. But like I said, I've never flown this thing without differential brakes, so I've never had a directional problem with this thing. There was only one time when I was landing it in the rain and the brakes were wet that it's kind of a stormy day, and I came in and landed, and plane started to veer, and I went to use the brakes, and it really wasn't there. So it was gun the engine to get the rudder to work, and that straightened it out, and that was it. It happened once.
Dave, this is Philip Langford in San Marcos, California. Did you say this is a GU canard, and
Yes.
you haven't any vortex generators? How was your experience in the rain?
It slows down 20 miles an hour. Of course, the pit, the nose just drops, and you got to yank back on the stick. And but it's, I can kind of show you here. What happens is, when it goes away, you end up flying about like this. So it's just basically flying on the elevators, and a bead of water will form right along here and just sit there, right along the edge. And but then when you fly out of the rain and it dries, all of a sudden it just goes away.
Huh.
Yeah, of course. So I can trim it, I could trim it like this and fly it. And but my rule is I don't take off with the wet canard. I just don't do it. So I've landed in the rain many times, which means it's a power on type of and going a little faster, but you kind of need the power to and of course I learned from my hang gliding days, you want to be underneath the big puffy clouds to catch the thermals and fly up to cloud base. Great. And when I first was flying this thing, I went, oh look, a cloud street, and go up and catch the lift. This is great. And all of a sudden realized I got bugs all over the plane because it gets sucked up by the thermals.
Huh.
If you need something to do this summer, I'm planning on going back to Enid for the Field of Dreams. So you're welcome to join us. Maybe we can pair up and make a flight of 2 that direction.
I haven't done any real shows and stuff in years, which would be nice. I've been thinking about getting back into it. One of the things that I thought of when I'm flying, this has always been this way, I get a little bit of buffeting in the elevator. It's not much, but you can kind of see it in the stick and can feel it. It's notice, you don't really notice it unless you pay attention to it. And what I think it is the laminar flow right here being broke up by the prop wash. So one of the things I thought of trying was maybe putting vortex generators right in this area here where the prop wash would be, to maybe straighten that out. It's just an idea. But I've never liked the look of the vortex generators, and so I've just lived with the way it is. Like I say, I have gone looking for rain showers on some cross-country trips just to wash the bugs off.
Could your sparrow screener possibly be stalling?
That's what I was wondering, Jerry.
What's interesting is that that was there before the sparrow strainer, and it's there afterwards. That didn't make any difference.
What is the maker of the propeller?
This one is Props Inc., which he's kind of retired now. And it's okay. I mean, I've tried, the original Cali prop, and then two Sturba props, a pretty Warnke, almost constant speed prop. I do have another. I do have another prop story. The original propeller that came with the kit. It's the one that I broke on the runway in that first ground loop, but it wasn't the first time it got damaged. So this is the break from, just putting it on its nose. It was idling at the time. You see, it didn't even really get the other side. Well, what did happen? If you look right here, this is a damage to the trailing edge. It's got a crack. We were on our way to Oshkosh, and I had a different treatment on the cowling holes. They were basically just openings. They didn't ramp in at all like they do now. And I had not been periodically retorquing the propeller bolts enough. And one of those bolts broke. And if you can see the nuts are right here, right? One of those, it broke right underneath the nut. And those are 3/8, AN bolts. And that nut bounced around and flew out the hull and hit the trailing edge of the propeller. And we had gone over the Sierras and landed in Elko, Nevada, and the lineman came out and he stops and he goes, have you seen this? And he saw that, because he noticed the damage on the propeller, and we went, oh shit. So what I ended up doing was, well, one of the things I had done early on, I don't know if you can see there's a line right there where it changes color. This is a Kevlar matting that I had put on. You could see through it, and the leading edge protection. But I had that put on early on, and I think that's what kind of helped hold all this together. So I ended up, that's a 5-minute epoxy aluminum foil and sandpaper repair that it did at the time, and we ended up flying all the way out to Oshkosh and back with with that. We went to the truck stop because the airport didn't have any bolts of the right size. I went to the truck stop and got grade 8 bolts and replaced them all, and then we just kept going. We were only down 2-3 hours. And that's when I tried the Ivo prop at Oshkosh, with the idea that maybe it could be, turned into a bit of a constant speed prop. But with the base being flat, it just, I flew with it out around the lake to Lansing, Michigan, and it ended up just flying it back and giving the prop back to him. And put this old prop back on. Just that the Warnke propeller, he's long gone, but I bought one of those, when he was still going, and it never seemed right. Something was wrong. Beautiful prop, but it turned out I measured the angle of attack of the two blades, and they were different. And so I ended up going around and around with him. And so he quote fixed it. And I got it back, bolted on, and the thing was right. But then I fired it up without the spinner on, and the whole thing, the outside part was just wobbling around. He had just ground the base of it to line up the tips, which made the whole middle part out of round. And I almost had to go to court over that. But I eventually got my money back. And then he died.
Oh, I'd keep that prop if you can get 180 mile an hour on 64 horse. I want one of them too.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like I say, if 56 by 49.
Wow.
Is what all of them are, and they all of them except for this one, all of them pretty much did the same thing.
What's your plane weigh?
600 pounds.
Oh, that certainly explains that.
Like I say, it's not loaded down with a bunch of stuff. It's yeah.
Guys, I want to let you know we've got 5 minutes left.
Nice, clean airplane.
Yeah, you think you're the highest time Q2 airplane?
I have no idea.
You don't have a Hobbs meter in it, right, David?
No, it was just off of my logs. No. I think it'd be pretty hard to wear out. When I took the engine apart, there was just like no wear on the crank and all of that, and I've always been using good oil and I've kept it. There was one of the things that you can tell if you're running too heat is when you pull the valve covers off, there is brown stink around underneath there. I was doing something where I ran the engine and got that stain. Still within specs. According to the cylinder head temperature, they had you screw it in the tap and drill it, but I've got it where it's supposed to be underneath the spark plug. And so I've always been able to keep you know, runs at about 350. And
Dave,
you know,
we got about 3.5 minutes left. One couple of guys asked again, when you first built this, you built it with your dad. When was your first flight and who made that first flight?
it was first flight was I think it's December of '84, and yeah, and it was my dad who did it, who flew it for the first time. He was 74 years old.
Oh,
And he had gotten out without telling me at the time while we were still building. He went out and you know, started flying again and got his ticket back, and totally surprised me with you know, because I was working on getting my license. You know, my first thought was, I'll get my license in my own plane. Yeah. No, nothing illegal about that, but insurance companies laugh in your face. So, you know, I went and trained on Cetabrias because, you know, of the tail dragger thing. But he had gone out and renewed his ticket. He'd gone out to the airport down San Luis Obispo, and there was going to be a guy, an instructor was going flying, and he said, "Hey, you want to go flying with him?" And I said, "Oh, sure. You know, any chance to get in the air and, you know, talk to an instructor." And got the airplane flying. The instructor, "Oh, I forgot something." And he steps out and walks off into the building. And my dad walks around the plane, gets in to the pilot seat, and looks at me and says, "Get your feet off the brakes. Let's go flying." Idea. It was great. But that was the only time that he flew it, and I gave him one side. It was, you know, his interest was in building it and doing that first flight. And you know, he was a navigator for the Flying Tiger Airlines, so he knew a lot of, you know, pretty cool pilots. And I remember the guys as a kid. You know, they were all crazy. And we'd been flying the plane for a few years, and they had a Tiger reunion down at San Luis Obispo at a hotel there right on the beach. And I went, you know, flew down there and went to the reunion with them. And, you know, like I say, there's all the Tigers guys going all the way back to the AVG. I said, "Well, go out on the cliff and I'll do a flyby in the morning." And they were like, "Oh yeah, great." So they're all out there standing on the cliff looking out to sea. Well, I came in over the top of the hotel, down in over the, you know, in between the buildings, you know, it was a U-shaped hotel, got down to just over their heads from behind, and went.
Hey, Dave, I got to cut you off here. I'm sorry, but we got about 42 seconds left here. And I want to thank you very much for coming out so early in the morning and doing this for us. Great plane, great stories. And we'll have this uploaded in a couple of days. So everybody wave and say bye to Dave, and we'll catch you later.
Bye, Dave.
Hi, Dave. Thanks so much.
All right.
Bye.
Hey, well, thank you. It was fun to do. Great idea. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, Dave. Like to make contact with you.
Oh,
Take care.
This summer after this COVID, we can get together.
We hope so.
Very good.
Fingers crossed.